First of all, thank you all for coming out. We'll go ahead and call this community meeting to order. And let me just start there. This is a publicly noticed community meeting. It is being recorded for posterity. And so therefore, there are no Brown Act issues for members of the LMAC board to go ahead and share their opinions and hear one another's thoughts. We just ask that you then not go and discuss it amongst yourselves without being in an open meeting, okay? So thank you all for coming out. My name is Pat Hume. I am the 5th District Supervisor overseeing this part of Sacramento County, this wonderful part down here in the Delta. And I came to an LMA board meeting, I think back in February maybe, and proposed doing this, which is essentially getting people together to talk about where Locke is, what it was originally set up as, how it's been functioning, how it's not been functioning, and how we can maybe go forward in rowing in the same direction. And so we're here tonight to have that conversation, and I'm going to go over some rules of conduct. One, that make it easier since it is being recorded, so that folks that are watching this meeting at a later date or on their computers later are able to track the meeting. But then more importantly, I just want to make sure we have basically a general sense of decorum and respect for one another so that we can share our ideas freely, we can talk openly, because I think the one thing that I know I certainly came to this meeting is that Locke is a pretty darn special place. And I think we can all agree upon that, and we all want to see what's best for it. And we may have different ideas about what that is, but we want to see it move forward and make sure that it is preserved for its rich heritage and history, and that future generations will be able to get as much enjoyment out of it as we all have. So those are the reasons why we're here. When I came to that board meeting, I said that there were a couple of different governance options that we could explore. Obviously some being very similar to what's happening now, and some being very dissimilar. And so we're going to go over those. We explored, I think, 6 options total, 4 of which, once they were teased out, really seem infeasible because of either the complexity or the cost, or what the size of Locke relative to the type of governance that would be put into place. And so Lindsay will go over those, and then Krista will come up and she'll kind of talk about the 2 options that really seem to be most viable going forward. And there are variations of those 2 options, but we're here to solicit feedback and to find out just kind of the temperature of where folks are and what you all would like to see going forward for the future. And then we'll come back after the beginning of the year and further refine what we've studied and what we've explored and what it means. And so once they present the options, then Dave will kind of go over, and I'll introduce these folks in just a second. Dave will go over more of the community discussion and the feedback that we're seeking and why we need that to inform our decisions. And we will have somebody coming around to you with a microphone so that you can be amplified so that the microphones pick you up on the recordings. Okay, and then that way we can have but then those thoughts will be written down. If it's a question we can answer on the fly, we will, but for the most part, we will be writing down these questions so that we can take them away and come back with a fully baked answer at the end of that. So, I'm Pat Hume. I have my Chief of Staff, Rebecca Sloan, my Special Assistant, Stephanie Kaus. These are the folks, obviously, when you reach out to the office, you're probably going to get them more often than you get me. I have with us Deputy County Executive Dave DeFonte. He is the Deputy County Executive over all of community development, so everything that has to do with building, planning, situations such as these. And then from the Department of Economic Development, we have the Director, Crystal Bethke, and Lindsay Fukushima. And so they are here because they are really sort of the governance experts relative to PBIDs and CSDs and those types of things. So they're going to go through all of those options and the intricacies therein. So are there any questions before we get started? Yes, Martha?
Is there a packet available with all the documents?
There is, and it will be passed out shortly once we get to the 2 option scenario. So at first, it's just going to be a presentation from Lindsay that will take questions after we're done with presenting all of the options, but once Crystal gets up and starts talking about the two potentialities, then we'll have a packet so that you can see some of the differences between the two. Okay? So with that, I'll turn it over to Lindsay.
Well, good evening, everybody. So we looked at, as Supervisor Hume was mentioning, we looked at several different options, considering, the size of this area and the types of properties that exist on it. So one of the first ones we looked at was a property business improvement district, which is similar in some senses to an HOA, except it's for commercial properties only, and it is property owner driven. So one of the reasons why we looked at that is because it does create stable funding sources, assessments. It's when a group of property owners agree to start this, they create a district and they decide to self-assess. And through those assessments, they get collected from your property taxes. So it creates a much more stable funding source than, say, a lot of other, like an HOA where you write a check and you send it in. One of the things with it, though, is, as part of the governance, you would have to have a 501c6, which would bring you back to kind of where some of your struggles are right now. So you would be beholden to Davis Sterling as well as Brown Act if you were to do a PBID, because PBID is only for commercial properties and multifamily residential, so you would still need something to cover residential properties. So an HOA of some sort would still need to be in existence. So that was one of the main reasons we felt like this isn't going to be a very good fit for this area. Also, the number of commercial properties you have in Locke is quite small in comparison to what we have for PBIDs. We have Antelope PBID in the county, and they have over 100 properties that are commercial. So, and they are one of our smallest. So if that gives you kind of an idea. There's also the fact that it's not a quick process. It's about a year to 2 years to create a PBID. It just kind of depends on, the level of outreach you're able to get done, and it's about $65,000. So that was one of the reasons we felt like that's probably not going to be a good fit for this organization in this area. One of the other things we looked at was a community services district. So these are districts that are initiated by residents of an unincorporated area to, provide a wide variety of different types of services. It could be water, garbage collection, wastewater, just a whole myriad of different ones. But this one is quite an undertaking. You would have to go through the Local Agency Formation Commission, also known as LAFCO. So that process takes about 2 to 3 years is what the estimate is for something like this. And it's about $150,000 to $200,000 to create. And then it's another $50,000 annually to manage. So it's pretty cost prohibitive. There's also, there's a small number of properties and a small, amount of services that you guys are trying to fund. And this type of district and governance would not be good for this area because you basically would be overtaxing, it feels like, even though it would be just a burden on a lot of the property owners. So also some reason why we didn't feel like this was going to be a good fit either. And the reason we looked into these is because I know that Supervisor Hume's office and other county staff had received inquiries about some of these forms of governance in particular. So that's why we really tried to research into it. One of the other ones we looked at was a community facilities district. And, we talked with finance, we talked with a bunch of different groups and organizations about community facilities districts. A community facilities district is a method of financing public improvements and services where no other source of funding is available. So they're called CFDs. A CFD may be established by, a county, city, special district, or joint powers authority, but it's also another that's going to be kind of pushed by property ownership. And in order for it to pass, most of these have to be voted on by residents, property owners, at a 2/3 vote, so in order to pass. So you would have to have pretty strong buy-in from the whole community for one of these to go through. This would also, once again, you would be subject to Brown Act. So you would, once again, have to kind of follow those rules. And I know that that's been a little bit of a strain to have Brown Act and Davis Sterling for you guys. So, but we did look into it. And again, this is another one where the cost is, between $150,000 and $200,000 to establish, and about $50,000 to run every year. And then one of the last ones we looked at was a county service area. And we did a lot of research, and this one is another where you're looking at 2 to 3 years. It's about $100,000 to create a new one and about $50,000 to run it. These are just estimated costs. I think the last time the county worked on one of these was back in 2013. So these are best estimates on the cost. It could be more. The basic premise of a CSA is to fund maintenance of public infrastructure within specific communities that the county would not otherwise be able to fund through traditional sources like property taxes and sales tax, fuel tax, et cetera. This would also need to go through that LAFCO process. So we're talking 2 to 3 years. It is quite extensive, and it's not an easy process. It's costly to administer. The only thing that is positive is that it does create a stable funding source, but like the others, it's going to be subject to Brown Act. It's going to require 2/3 vote as well. So those were the 6 that, those are the 4 that we went through. Crystal's going to discuss the other 2.
Good evening, everyone. I have a packet that the clerk's office is going to pass out now. It's got these right here. As options 1 and 2 for us. Is this a little bit better? There we go. So we'll hold just a moment so that everyone can get these passed out. But I will say that option number 1, there's a reason that an HOA was originally established in Locke and would potentially still be one of the best options, and it has a lot to do with the small size of the area and the mix of residential and commercial that's located here. So the first option that we have listed there is to update the Locke Management Association's bylaws to remove Sacramento County's active involvement in the association, which is the appointed seat on the LMA Board of Directors. So there is no cost associated with this action, and it would be the quickest, which is about a 10 to 12 month time frame, really depending on the number of revisions. This is something that the county would work to update the proposed bylaws that would come from this, that were last revised in April of 2019 by the Board of Supervisors hearing approval. The process for this, like I said, is about 6 to 9 to 12 months, really depending on those bylaw changes that are going to be proposed and incorporated. The county would work with the LMA to revise these bylaws. Specifically, there are a couple of articles that would remove the county's appointed seat, and then they remove the requirement of approval by the county board to change the composition of the LMA Board of Directors. So, additional discussions to the clarity of the association's name is also something that could come out of this. There's been discussions with the name being the Locke Management Corporation versus the Locke Management Association. That could be cleared up throughout this process. And then, of course, through this, if a non-property owner was to hold a seat on the LMA board, that would be a part of this process. County staff would help to draft the bylaw amendment and then take the item to the Board of Supervisors hearing for vote and approval. Just for clarity, the CC&Rs would remain. We went through several considerations, positive, and some others that we would like you to consider throughout this one. To remove the county-appointed seat on the LMA, that really does eliminate the Brown Act requirements for the LMA, which we have noticed has been one of the issues that has been identified to us. The LMA would then only need to adhere to the Davis-Sterling Act, which is very specific to HOAs and is less burdensome on the requirements. Additional review and bylaw amendments can be made during this period, really to improve the governance structure. The LMA really might want to consider working with an independent consultant to help improve whether it be operations or provide David Sterling requirement training for the LMA board, and then can assess potential grant opportunities as a designated historic district. The original consultant that helped with the formation of the LMA is still a local consultant that does a lot of work in this area still. And then, of course, time and consideration on the amendment to the bylaws is something that would be a major consideration, as it is much quicker than the other options that Lindsay discussed. So again, I'm sure that there are lots of questions, and so we will take those as soon as I get through option number 2. So option number 2 is to dissolve the Locke Management Association altogether. So again, there is no cost, but the LMA really may need to consult with an attorney to assist with the dissolution process due to the amount of property that's owned in the LMA. This is a much longer time frame. We actually spoke to a couple of consultants that do this work, and it is a 2 to 3 year process. And that's really depending on how quickly the required documentation can be submitted to the governing agencies and the approval period of the agency. And that's a very, standard process that we've outlined, which, there's 8 steps, but within those multiple. And again, and this is not really a complete or exhaustive list, but it is the standard for dissolving a nonprofit. A couple of things to consider there, while it is pretty long, is that the LMA-owned property would need to revert to a separate 501c3 nonprofit for the or the existing Locke Foundation. And then in order to complete this process, all debts and liabilities of the association must be paid in full. So that is another item to keep in mind. So really the considerations for this are that the common area maintenance would need to revert to the county for things like lighting, road, and landscaping. Our staff would need to reach out to the LMA board to get a definitive clarity on the level of maintenance currently being done to the properties to create a realistic estimate for the cost to the county. More than one county department would need to be involved in this due to the maintenance needs. We've got the Department of Transportation that would likely need to take on the private property. Gravel roads, county regional parks would need to take on servicing the public bathrooms and landscaping of that field work and wooded area behind the town. Again, this is a multi-step legal process, like I mentioned, so it is quite an undertaking that would probably require legal guidance. And while there is no identified cost associated with that, that in itself should be taken into consideration. Because there would be no longer an assessment on monies to maintain those common areas. Now, in California, the CC&Rs would remain even if the HOA dissolves. So if individual residents try to enforce CC&Rs, it could lead to more legal concerns. And then lastly, while the county has a lot of factual information on this, this would be up to the group to go through that process and dissolve. So I think that there are probably a lot of questions that we have, if you wrote those down. So Dave is probably going to take some questions, as our deputy when it comes to especially option number 2. What that maintenance would look like is something that he'd be able to answer questions on. But Lindsay and I are going to hop over here, and we're going to take your questions and any recommendations. And like Supervisor Hume mentioned earlier, Dave's going to go around with a microphone and take those questions from you directly. Or I think maybe one of our clerk's office will. There we go. Mandy's going to do it for us.
Actually, the clerk's office is going to come around with the microphone, but before we jump into questions, I just would like to put some things out there that I forgot to mention earlier. And that is, one, I want to recognize Mr. Clarence Chu, who's in the audience, who he and my predecessor, Don Natoli, really put this structure together. And so I want to honor the fact that there were a lot of good intentions that went into this and a lot of forethought onto how this would work and the reasoning behind it in order to recognize that the main street of Locke is bigger than the community of Locke. But what I've found, because I've heard from so many residents expressing their opinions, is it's not fair to me that the folks in the back of Locke should be responsible for providing public benefit. And so the common public bathroom, the parking lot, some of the things on Main Street that are more for the outward-facing part of Locke is being borne by the property owners that live in Locke. And that, to me, it seems to be an unfair and untenable situation. Conversely, I don't think that the Locke Foundation has met its full potential as far as what it can do in order to really attract some of that outside grant money and whatever else to do the promotion of Locke and step into that space so that it's the Locke Foundation's responsibility for providing for that public-facing benefit. And so those are just a couple of things that I wanted to kind of put on the table that, you know, I've heard from Locke Foundation board members, from residents of the back of Locke, from other folks in the Delta. Obviously, I sit on several agencies related to the Delta Protection Commission, which established the National Heritage Area, the Delta Conservancy, which funds a lot of projects in the Delta. And so I'm just trying to figure out a way that we take all of those good intentions that were put into place, iron out some of the wrinkles, and make something that is sustainable and really can maximize the potential of what Locke can be. And so with that, unless there's anything else that you want to add, I think we'll jump into the questions. And again, if it's a yes or no or kind of something that can be answered right now, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll just park it and we'll go back and we'll research it, and then we'll do this again next year.
Yeah, so we do have members. So Dave DeFonte, Deputy County Executive. Just real quick, my role at the county, I oversee 8 departments. So I oversee airports, community development, economic development, parks, transportation, water, waste management, et cetera. So a lot of the issues that you deal with down here are things that my departments do for the county. So I do think we'll be able to answer a lot of your questions tonight. If we're not able to, again, we're going to be writing them down, and we will be back during sometime after the first of the year, and we'll have time between now and then to research any questions that come up and come back to you very prepared with answers. So with that, we do have members from the clerk's office here with microphones, and if you have, I'm sure there's questions, so if you want to raise your hand, we'll recognize you, and somebody from the clerk's office will come over with a microphone.
Who wants to be that brave soul to kick it off?
Yes, sir. And if you could,
Hang
really
on,
quick,
Gene, the mic's coming to
if
you.
everybody could speak into the mic just so it's properly recorded for the future.
I scanned through your details, and the first thing I saw that it would eliminate the Brown Act. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay, that means you can do away with the press coverage, and I protest that. And I know that isn't Pat's style. He's very good with the press.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Regarding the Brown Act, elimination of the Brown Act would eliminate any public members or any merchants, any residents of Locke. Only the property owners are allowed to attend HOA and common interest development meetings under Davis-Sterling Act rules. So there's a conflict between Davis-Sterling Act and Brown Act with whom can attend a meeting. I don't think you want to eliminate all the interested parties who are not property owners in Locke. There's only 32 property owners. And that would eliminate all of the Chinese American associations as well, and all their interests. It would eliminate anyone who has an interest in our town. And it might put a gate with a code on it at the top end of River Road where it meets Locke Road coming down the hill, that only the property owners and their residents could get into. I don't think you want to do that.
Okay, so I can take some of those points right now. We'll definitely make note of all of that because that is a consideration. If you were to go to a straight HOA, what would the boundaries of that HOA be? What would they be in charge of? And that type of thing. And so, as it stands right now, Main Street is a county-owned street. That cannot be gated. It could not be closed off. And so, as I said at the beginning of this, before we got into the questions, I think that there's one of the important considerations from where I sit is to recognize that the interests and the purpose and the significance of Main Street is different than the responsibilities of the back of Locke. And so I think if you look at what the LMA is currently responsible for, landscape maintenance, common area maintenance, paying the electrical bills, you know, I don't know if the town manager showed up tonight. Great, wonderful to meet you. So maybe, I don't know if now but later, to talk about what the LMA actually does, because I think that rather than getting into this is the problem that this type of thing that would create, we can talk about how do we bifurcate out those things that should not be an HOA consideration versus those things that should absolutely still have public representation. And so what I'm trying to do is remove the conflict that has been expressed of, do we abide by Davis-Sterling, do we abide by the Brown Act, and I think we could just make a cleaner situation that has more clear delineation of what is in the interest of the residents of Locke versus what is in the interest of the historic importance of Locke. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just got a couple quick questions on the, okay, all right. For the first option, you eliminate the city seat, correct?
The county?
The county seat?
Yep.
And then it becomes an HOA, but right now, the board consists of a whole bunch of non-property owners.
That's right.
Well, if you own a house, I'm an owner, business owner, I own a building. How about I get on a board that decides what goes on with your house? So my question here is, you got a bunch of people on a board right now that are making decisions on people's property that they own no vested interest in. So with option one, it becomes an HOA. How does it redesign the rest of the board there? Are they now become only homeowners? How does that, what are the options of the seating of that? So that's a great question, and that kind of touches on what I was just talking about, which is I think that would have to get sussed out as far as what are the boundaries of the HOA. And the thing is that Locke is not a clear-cut, here are homeowners, here are businesses, because you have residents that live above the businesses. So it would probably be a matter of where you'd want to draw the line for the property owners, and then I would assume, and that's all it is, that the board members of the HOA would have to be property owners, and so then it would matter of whether or not the boundary of that HOA includes the buildings on Main Street or doesn't include the buildings on Main Street. But I would, and this kind of goes back to the point I was just making, is I would be curious from your perspective, what does this board currently control that affects your property that you feel like you don't have a say in? Because that's really the governance issue of the whole meaning and purpose of this.
Yes.
Sure,
Yes,
that'd be
please.
great.
So I've been a public school teacher for 20 years. I got a master's. I'm educated. I've been on this board for a long time. It is, and we've gone through, Don Natoli had a meeting, when was it, 15 years ago? We had a meeting to discuss these issues. It's typical politics. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever changed. We met sincerely trying to get a change, and nothing ever came of it. And I'll give you one incident that would explain my frustration with the way this is set up.
Okay.
I was serving on the board. Bubba, the owner of Al the Wops, came up to the board and said, I want on the agenda to change parking just to get the cars moving. We put it on the agenda, we had subcommittees, we met with the public, we finally voted on it. We did everything in our power to do it right. We got a compromise, a unanimous vote. We sent it to the county for change. Nothing ever happened. We sent emails. You can track them down if you think I'm not telling the truth. Track them down. We said, well, when's it going to change? Then nothing ever changed. 6 months later, Bubba gets in my face and screams in my face how the LMA is not doing anything. So that's just one instance where the county is dropping the ball. You know, back then, and then now, they had an issue. I tried to put on the agenda an item. It took me 2 years. They build, if you don't know Locke, it consists of low-income people for the most part, working families, blue-collar workers. They billed everybody during COVID, a time they weren't even, look it up too, billed them for the year they weren't even operating. So I had a dispute, tried to get it on the agenda. 2 years went by before I ever got on the agenda. And then there was already a discussion. I like what you said before, don't discuss it. It's supposed to be in front of people. Decisions were made in other rooms, not in front of us and not in front of the board. So that's just two instances where it becomes completely frustrating, and it's a violation of our rights. You know, because I was in dispute on that, they wouldn't let me run for the board. So, and they passed laws on that.
So you hit on kind of a thing that I have been feeling, which is that the county is halfway pregnant in Locke, right? And so what I'm looking for is we need to either be all in or all out. We can't be in this sort of how do we come in and we have some powers, but then we don't have powers and some things are controlled. I mean, I'd rather either you come to me and say, and look, I've got nothing but immense respect for Don Natoli. I love that man dearly, but he and I are two different people. And how do I fix a problem? And Don would have all the considerations and all the things that he would be thinking about, and sometimes it would lead to inaction. So I can't speak to the past, and my goal is to get to a point, and I know this is probably naive of me to even think this is possible, but get to a point where we just bury the past. Say, look, that's what happened. How do we move forward, and how do we get so that we have a situation where everybody feels good about how Locke is being managed, how it's being run, and we can start to focus on the important thing, which is making sure that everybody gets to enjoy this very special place. So, yeah.
Yes, sir.
You got a mic?
Yep,
Yes,
coming
we do.
around.
I'll hold it. No, you are a puppet master right now behind our board as a puppet master pulling strings. And I want you to, every time I go to the meeting, let go of the microphone or I won't talk. This is a prison, sir. This is a prison. Look at this. There are 5 people that live in Locke here, that own Locke. You've set it up. We're working through your solutions. You just gave it to us. We don't even know. We're going to ask questions about issues you just brought up. You even didn't give us a handout when we came in to read before the meeting. You waited and handed it to us. We're all sitting here like, what? Who are we? May I speak and keep going?
You're absolutely,
Okay,
you are.
thank
Yeah.
I am speaking. The reason we're here is because of the county. 20 years ago, I sat in Don Natoli's office and told him, this plan won't work. And he said, oh yes, it will. I said, no, it won't. 3 times it won't. I was there for a half hour, over an hour. And the reason it wouldn't work is because the demographic of Locke. The people are poor. They're barely surviving. It's a very low-income town. I mean, there are houses for rent. You could rent places for $50 a month there. So it's very difficult to have a professional, organized government entity running it. And the county never backed us up. We made decision after decision that the county just stopped, went against us. We decided against a door, historic. We had a historic person who was on the state historic, working for the state. And we decided the door shouldn't be there because it would change the historicity of the historicalness of the town. Well, the county moved against us. We decided to get out from under this board. We voted as a board to change it and get out of the Brown Act, get out. Well, Don Natoli said, well, I don't trust your vote. So he took over the vote. He sent out letters to everybody. So everyone, the whole vote went through the county. Well, it came out identical. We all agreed to get out from under the Brown Act and get out and under David Sterling. So when we went, Debbie and I were the only ones there, and I think you were there at that meeting. And we, Don Natoli said, well, I don't really understand the David Sterling, so no. So the county has been our problem. Because it gave the people who didn't like anything the ability to go to the county and circumvent us. There were people who will get dressed, drive to Sacramento, pay for parking, go to the Board of Supervisors meeting, and wouldn't walk down the street to our meeting. And also, you expected the people, like I was not chairman for 4 years. And we were, well, this is just politics, you're probably familiar with it, I wasn't. But people just make up stories about you. We were lying, we were cheating, we were holding things, we were hiding things. I had an open agenda. I allowed an open agenda. Also, the Brown Act has a camera. Look, I'm not afraid to dance. I really don't care. I don't care what I look like. But a lot of people will not dance. And when you put a camera on someone, they change. That's a psychological fact. So our meetings were never open. They were always controlled, and we were following rules. We were following all the rules, like, yes, sir, no, sir, and trying to stay within the framework of a government agency, with the Brown Act, with filling out financial forms, with taking ethical courses. And the people who would come into our meetings would just throw rocks at it, say, kick us, say, punch us.
If I may,
Yeah, please,
if I may,
stop me.
because, yeah, I'm hearing what you're laying down. Trust me.
Okay, good.
And you and I are on the same page, which is status quo isn't working.
Thought through. Go ahead.
So here's I don't want to control you. I don't want to say, tell me which one of these options you like better, but just in fairly concise terms, what would you like to see?
Well,
You tried something already in the past, it sounds like, that didn't go through, so.
Should be split between the commercial and the residential.
All right.
And the commercial,
There's a little something to go off of.
look, the Sacramento County put a lot of money in Locke. We're talking millions of dollars. I've watched it from just everything. Green thumb, you put all new water systems in, parking lots you put in, bathrooms, you put in all new electrical.
Yeah.
But the county's put a lot of money over the years.
Yeah.
I've been there 50 years. So, so yes, if you could somehow if you want to keep your Brown Act on the Main Street, that's one thing. That's a public entity. It's on the National Historic List.
Mm-hmm.
It is a public belief, but the back of town is residential. We're not part of that.
Yeah.
I believe if you can make two committees, one of homeowners who have the private property in the back,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever you need to create in the front. If you need to keep the Brown Act there, to keep the county involved, but you have to get involved and stay with us.
Okay.
Because really, the county abandoned us. We were there, I mean, we have no idea how much energy it takes to create these meetings. I mean, you have to get there early. We had to print everything. We had to set the rooms up, break them. We had thousands of hours.
Let me rein you in,
Thank you again.
okay? And we'll go ahead and get some other ideas in here, but your concerns have been noted, absolutely.
I think I've been heard, at least if but really, it's been really, really hard and frustrating for us for over the years. I mean, you have no idea how hard we worked
Sure.
to keep that town together, and the county has never backed us up on
Okay.
any point. They've abandoned us.
Okay.
And it was interesting just to say, because people would write to the county and just make up stories. And the counties came down in waves. Where's that swimming pool? Oh, that's only 8 inches. That's legal, because we were supposed to. They came to my house. Oh, where's that sauna? Well, there is no sauna. They made it up. They were there a month ago. Somebody called the Sacramento sheriffs and said, I was stealing electric in my barn in the back. And so SMUD sent down 2 trucks, 2 guys, good guys, you know, it was like they were, and they're going behind my barn and looking and trying to see, you know, whether I had never stolen.
Oops, sorry.
But that's the kind of stuff that goes on.
Understood.
We could swap war stories
Thank you.
sometimes, Russell, trust me.
I'm sure everybody's done with me.
So I have to agree with Russell that I think we need a split, that if the HO stays in the back, Sacramento County and the sidewalks in Locke is where we need you. I don't think we need an HOA or a business district. We are governed just like in the businesses in Cortland or Hood or Walnut Grove. We are already governed, they're already governed by Sac County. We don't need any more governance on front, but what we do need is public funding. And if we go to a straight HOA, I don't know what our ability would be like to get public funding. Don gave us $100,000 for that walkway, but we were a public entity. I don't know who's going to fund a straight HOA, but if the back wants to go that direction, I would like to see Sac County also pay for the lighting on Main Street and River Road currently. Those are public roadways, and the LMA should not be paying for the lighting on those 2 sections. As far as, he mentioned getting rid of the Brown Act and the Davis-Sterling Act. Why I am concerned about the Brown Act is because most of the town are renters. We're called invitees in the CCNRs. And that is kind of a really disadvantaged term. And so I hate, you know, we don't have any rights to really vote. You know, we do have public comment under the Brown Act, but if you take that Brown Act aspect away, and I know it's been difficult, then the renters and the business owners like Ginny and I that don't own property will have no say. So I definitely think splitting the community, you know, the HOA in the back, but you said even if you dissolved it in the front, the CCNRs would still be involved. Why? Can we get a ruling on that? Is there somewhere we can, you know, if Main Street just went back to Sacramento County and you were our governance, how do we get rid of that CCNR ruling for fronts for the Main
So
Street?
I hear some whispering going on. First of all, Lisa, thank you for those very productive comments. I really appreciate it. I hear some whispering going on over here that I think no matter what, any option we choose is going to require bylaw changes. And in fact, even if we were to do nothing, we need to have bylaw changes because right now it's LMA in some places, it's LMC in some other places. So that needs to be cleaned up. So no matter what, we've got to go back and change the bylaws. I think we could address some of this stuff in that same process. Okay. Yes.
Hi, my name's Ginny Giles. I own a business on Main Street. I am a renter, Clarence Cheese renter, and I'm also on the board on the LMA LMC. I completely agree. I've never understood why the public restrooms, any of that, or maintenance of the public parking lot, any of that should be on the business owners. I believe the Locke Foundation needs to change its mission statement, and that they could be going after a lot of funding, a lot of grant money that shouldn't have to be a part of the building owners. So I've been discussing it with several members of the Locke Foundation. That would be a fabulous thing. We need more parking. Our little public parking lot is actually for the residents. Half of those spots are taken up by residents. There's not enough resident parking, so that's a huge deal. So it would be great if they could take over the public restrooms, anything that's part of the public purview, and also be seeking resources to purchase what is our auxiliary parking lot owned by Clarence Chew for the actual visitors that would be paved and all that. I think that's never made any sense to me, so I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions on any of the options? Martha in the back.
Would any of these options remove the board's non-judicial foreclosure rights to seize our properties?
I can't answer that. I don't.
Yeah. We'll write that down and look into it.
Hi, I'm Douglas Shah. I'm the former chairman of LMC LMA. Well, I think today's conversation, we haven't covered anything about the business owner who do not own the properties, because business owners in Locke play a big part for our town in terms of bringing in tourists and keeping up our heritage. But we haven't included them in our narrative. So I don't have any suggestion, but I think we should take that into consideration.
Okay. Thank you.
Statement, you might want to look at the LMA budget, because that would help you assess how much yearly they spend in landscape maintenance, and that would give a clue to everyone about what that actual cost is. If we minus out legal fees that are running about $20,000 a year, we just hired a manager, which is about another $12,000. The insurance for both the directors and the properties, you know, we're probably up to maybe $35,000 right there. So what the landscaping part of it is, I would look at the budget of the LMA to see what the actual landscaping cost is, and that would give a clue.
As an option for the land, is it possible where the roads and the parking lots and the bathroom go to the county, and then the land could be divided up from the homeowners, and you eliminate all that cost? Couldn't they just not take on that section based on each building?
So I don't want to get too far in the weeds on that, but I will say this. Main Street already is a county road. The bathrooms, the parking lot, and the large lot behind the back of Locke that runs between Locke and I don't know, is that the Meadows? I think probably. That's all owned by the LMA. And so, look, I'm not going to promise anything, but there are state agencies that are spending money on the Delta right now. And to the extent that we could get state parks to lean in and maybe take some of that over under their obligations, since they have the boarding house already. I know that it's the Meadows and then the McCormick-Williamson track. There's things that are happening behind Locke that maybe there might be an opportunity for Locke to even potentially sell that main common area parcel, which would be an infusion of cash to help offset some of these expenses. I don't know exactly what is or is not possible, but I'm wanting to explore these things, and it sounds like, even though people are maybe coming at it from different perspectives and different reasons, it sounds like there's generally consensus that says we want Main Street to be its own thing, and we don't want to have the businesses burdened by doing for the residents, and the residents don't want to be burdened by doing for the businesses. Does that sound pretty?
Does anybody disagree with that?
Only a little, only in that it's not just businesses, it's also the historical aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, sure.
Absolutely.
Aren't necessarily part of the business. They may be there for the cultural reasons and to be on a tour or whatever. So may I say one more thing?
Please.
Sure, but just really quick, that general bifurcation, though, it sounds like there is support for that.
Yes.
I would definitely note that.
One last thing, I am going a little off topic, but it's actually directly related. When you came here for the safety meeting, I discussed the dangers of our road.
Yes.
And the increase, and you were going to look into that. And I've not heard one thing about us getting we were told by the Caltrans that we didn't bring in enough income to warrant speed bumps or a reduced rate or all that. Well, what they did is they came in on an off day, and they measured the amount of traffic going onto Locke Road. They didn't check the traffic and the speeding and all those cars. It is increasingly becoming more dangerous to the point where and I'm not lying, I fear getting in and out of my car. I fear trying to even get out without getting hit because people are flying by so fast. Putting that in, at 25 miles, leave it at 35. We're the only ones that are 35. All of the Delta has stop signs, speed bumps, flashing lights, 25 miles an hour. We're 35 miles an hour, none of that, and a crosswalk right on that road where somebody local has nearly been hit many, many times trying to cross over from the bus. So they say we don't bring in enough income. Well, people were forced to stop there and not endanger others' lives. Maybe they'd stop long enough to see, wow, we have a town here. Because every single weekend I hear, we didn't even know there was a town down here. So that's twofold. It would help our quality of life, and it would also bring more notice to Locke and more funds to Locke.
Yeah, and we'll note that on the notes here and dig into that between now and the next meeting. Income of a community should not be a consideration when talking about traffic safety matters, so I would like to better understand that.
6 people have gone in and literally drowned right when my car was totaled in December. The CHP that came by said, oh, no, 6 people have drowned right there when they went into the river. That's not the amount of cars that have gone in. We're talking just south of the boathouse. So people are dying. That should say something.
Yeah. I can tell you on my way down here for this meeting, I was passed on the river road on a double yellow line. And I was doing, Gene, turn your camera off for a second. I was doing better than the speed limit, and I still got passed.
A woman got forced into the river about 2 weeks ago when she was southbound and a car was overpassing several other cars in her lane, and she made the choice to go into the river, and that was just south of Twin Cities Road. She made it, thankfully. I talked to you guys, but yeah, I mean, things like that happen on a regular basis. It's very, very frightening. So we would very much appreciate that, and obviously more CHP.
Well, yeah, and I have tried to raise their awareness and get them down here, and I apologize for the lack of follow-up, because I do remember your comments from that meeting, so I will circle back with our DOT staff and see if we can't start working on some improvements there.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Deborah.
Hi, my name's Mary. I grew up in
You're
Locke.
up next.
I want to mention why I endorse dissolving the LMA in pretty simple terms. Locke is a village. It is so small that you cannot separate the politics from daily life in Locke. And it's important for government processes to be professional. The way concerns have been raised just here tonight, and I see your eyebrows raised and say, oh, this is something we need to take action on. This is something we can improve with. Write this down. This is important. That's the kind of leadership that Locke needs. What we've had are feuds that have been created by concerns. That's the nature of the size of this town.
Thank you.
Thank you. Manny up
And
here.
come around to the front, yeah.
Oh,
I think I have a
it was hidden back there.
Okay. I'll hold it.
Hi, I'm Deborah Mendel, property owner, and oh my goodness, how long have I lived in Locke, Russell? 20 years. I was on the board of directors for 10, a secretary for that whole time, because that's a job nobody usually wants. When I first moved to town, we had meetings. Connie King was still alive, and she would bring a Chinese chicken salad to every meeting. The board was packed with property owners. It was very carefully designed to have 6 property owners and a member at large, and I'm sure that in all the work that was put into that, one of the intentions was to make sure that since the buck stops with the property owners, and some of us have, some people have spent their lifetimes there, that they had the biggest sway. And I still think that is really a key, important factor here. With all due respect to people who rent and have businesses, that is, businesses come and go, renters come and go, but a lot of our residents, several of them have been here a very, very long time. I mean, Russell bought our property in '75. So that's what really means the most to me. And I had mentioned earlier when I first arrived that it's kind of upsetting to me that we have, I think, 6 property owners here. I wish that this had been distributed via maybe email to the property owners, then they would have had a sense of what was going to be discussed. I'm disappointed that hardly any of my fellow property owners are here. I know our chairman of the Locke Management Corporation is sick with COVID at home, but he's actually on my phone, so he can listen in.
Good.
I'm thinking that maybe my idea is that maybe a good place to start is with one of these options, which is the least radical and has the least unknowns, and that would be with removing the county position. And if that doesn't work, maybe go to the second one. The problem I have with your second suggestion is that I covet my gravel road in the back of town. It doesn't get hot like pavement. And I mean, I know what county likes to do. They pave. The lights, we still, our lights, especially in the back of town, we still have a say about what, although it's a struggle, we're struggling with, with getting lower lumens on our brilliant lights, which light the, I mean, they're blasting into our windows, some of them. So we still have say on important aspects of our own personal lives, especially in the residential section. That's not to say that the whole community loves the community garden picnic area. Russell built, what was it, a 20-foot table with benches so people could have, you know, quinceañeras there and parties, which we've done. So, you know, you're hearing things about conflict, and, you know, all relationships have conflicts. That happens. But we still have great community in Locke, and a lot of people with, you know, mutual interests. And the gardens, that's a part of our history. The Chinese and their, you know, community gardens, they grew all their own food, and that's a very important historic aspect of our town. I don't know what the solution is, but I'm thinking right now, as this has all come up, is that maybe a baby step would be to eliminate the county and see if that works. The other issue is, our meetings used to be filled with people, and the more people got picked on the board, you know, neighbor against neighbor, because, you know, they had disagreements, less people wanted to be on the board. Mm-hmm. And the other thing was, a camera was on them. And then maybe one neighbor is not there, but another neighbor shows up, and they could say, well, you know what, this thing's bugging me. And they'll be they're less inclined to speak up when there's a camera on them. They're going to feel like, oh, somebody's going to be mad at me, or, you know, as it is, I got my back towards that camera. I don't really want to be seen. But those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Deborah. I think that's a great kind of wrap up here. And I would just say that there are somewhat conflicting, we'll get back to you in just a second. There are somewhat conflicting interests in that what affects you folks that are living in the back of Locke is a completely different consideration than what happens on Main Street. And you're right, if the county were to take it over, we can't accept gravel roads. That's not up to county standards, so we would change that straight away. So, I mean, there's certainly other considerations. But what I'm hearing, and the woman in the back does want to add something, so we'll take those comments. What I'm hearing is, let's explore cleaning up the bylaws, establishing boundaries that establish the back of Locke for the benefit of the property owners in the back of Locke, and carve off Main Street, and maybe build up the Locke Foundation to be able to handle more of the affairs of Main Street. Does that sound like a general? Okay. Ma'am in the back there? Yeah.
I'm waiting for my microphone.
It's going. There it is.
Mr. DeVille.
Yeah.
My name is Diane Thomas. I'm a business owner and property renter in Locke. I've been here for 15 years. Just as an aside, it seems to me that United States of America was a place where people came where you didn't have to own property to be considered a member of the community. Vaguely, somewhere in a civics class in 8th grade, I do remember hearing something about the Constitution, but possibly Locke isn't governed by the Constitution, I'm not sure. I was called an invitee when I attended meetings. I was insulted. I was called names. Rumors were spread about me. And I continued to go to the meetings until I snapped one night and I never went back. But I'm a highly educated, well-informed, politically savvy woman of the 70s. I had to live through a whole lot of stuff that people here never knew about. So, and I don't even want to get into the whole political thing now, but we have a right to live and die in this town. We have a right to not be insulted. The people talked about being on the board and being insulted and having rocks thrown at you. I was just a member of the community, and I was insulted every time I went to a meeting. And I stopped going after a while, and I'm here because it's not in Locke. And it sounded like it was a possibly more open forum and something that might actually pertain to me as a human. So that's all.
So let me ask you, well, before you give up the microphone there, how do you feel about how the discussion has gone and sort of the consensus that we're building?
I feel like 15 years later, let's do something. You know, I do not believe that the people who own property in the town have the right to tell everybody else in the town what you can and can't do. I don't believe that.
Please address us up here. If you have questions or comments, we'll call on you. Please address your comments up here.
Okay, hold on. Alma's got honey over here. Absolutely.
Thank you, Diane. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Honey Lum, and I'm the vice chair and also secretary of the LMC board. I represent the LMC on behalf of Locke Foundation, so I really appreciate the LMC directors who are here this evening to speak up, as well as some of the residents and the property owners who are here. It's very important that the county listens to you and take action. Thank you, County Supervisor Pat Hume and your staff for being here. It's important that there needs some change in Locke. Sitting on the Locke Foundation board 10 years, and this is a historical landmark town. It's changed over time. 1915 to current day, population shift. Before, over 600 to 1,000 Chinese live in town. Now we have only 7 out of the 70 residents. So this is really significant. The buildings in town are deteriorating. Being a historical landmark, known the Star Theater, and it's like other buildings are falling apart. We do need help. We can't even get grants. Our hands are tied. We're limited in our skill sets, resources, and people do want change. We don't want to fight. We want solutions. And those that live in town, they want to see a healthy and safe town. We lead tours in town, and a number of businesses are closed. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, business owners and merchants in town, even the storefronts that are abandoned or haven't been rehabilitated, we do need help. Even the property owners, if they're neglecting their buildings, we can't help that because LMC doesn't own any building. We can't even generate revenue. Over 20 years in our budget, we have not even set aside a capital improvement or an operating reserve account. We go by year to year collecting assessments just to pay our bills. That's not enough. We're in a deficit when we have major expenses that are beyond our control. So this is where we do need some solutions, and it cannot be a status quo in that sense, because we're declining a community. What I like to also introduce our town manager. She started with us August this year, Maddie Seraphin. Maddie, if you come up and introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, good evening, everybody. Many people already know who I am. I haven't had the opportunity to meet any of you yet, but I'm Maddie Seraphin. I have been here a short while, and in that short while, I've learned quite a bit about town, and it's not in the best of way to learn something. It's been mostly through complaining and yelling at me, and what I've gathered mostly is that somebody or everybody really just needs a voice. And they look to me as to take their concerns and figure out a game plan and a solution. And so then I come to looking at our supervisor and his staff to help me, because that's kind of how it's governed at this moment. I have no argument with an HOA, except for the fact that an HOA really does pertain to residential property, and if you're going to pass it on to, say, residents, you need to add that into the lease. You need to say, we have an HOA here, so you are like us. But that's on another story. I have a lot of ideas for the town, and I am, again, their spokesperson. I'm here to take their concerns and try to do what I can with it. I've reached out to a couple of different organizations, your office, sheriff's office, volunteer fire department. I am saddened that I hadn't received any responses yet, but I'm hopeful that I will, and that we can sit down and take a look at, the CC&Rs are really out of date and conflict with a lot of other regulations, I will call them. But I do think Locke has a very promising future, and I think everybody does voice the exact same concern, and just they speak it a little differently. So I'm happy to be here, and I have 3 things that I'm working towards, and that's community, bringing this community as one. Safety, that's a big part of it. And then beautification, and that's about revenue. And I've looked at a lot of private funding sources and tapped into a lot of my private personal networking, trying to figure out what we can do for this town. But like I say, we all need to do this together. So thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. I know that I've been non-responsive to, you did reach out to introduce yourself in anticipation of this meeting, but now that we've done this, maybe we can get together. I'd love to hear your thoughts and some of the things and pitfalls and shortfalls that you see. Okay?
And if I may, really quick, to Honey's point, obviously a top priority for tonight's discussion was to address the governance issues that we've talked about thus far. But another issue that you raised was the foundation, right? And our economic development staff does have a lot of experience working with nonprofits to build their capacity to make them more effective going after grants and doing some of the things that the foundation was set up to do in the first place. So once we, get some momentum behind addressing the governance issues, that's something I think the county can bring to the table, is helping build that capacity within the foundation, so you're better set up to go after those grant monies. Because we do a lot of grants at the county. You have a very unique story to tell to go after grant monies that even the county wouldn't compete well for, just given the nature of Locke, what it means historically, what it means currently. So I think there's a lot of potential there.
Do you two have new information or?
I just wanted to ask that you not take away the legislative seat that I represent on the board until we come up with a solution, and that you continue to support me in that position for the next year, because I do have a lot of good information. I have a good understanding, and I do represent business owners and renters. So I would ask that you reappoint me for the next year and keep me in this seat so I can continue the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just back to my original statement, there are 2 commercial owners on the board. How many homeowners that live in town that own the building are on the board? No. Live in full town, there's maybe 1, and he's not full time. 1. Every decision needs to be, in my opinion, at least communicated to homeowners, the people that own the building. There's 1 seat on the board. making decisions up on everybody's property with one representative that lives part-time in that town.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, if you make it short. All of the folks in the back of the room got to pack up all this equipment before they can go home tonight.
Okay, I think Locke is a small town, and I think we need to have voices from everybody.
Yeah.
And I think county should not let go Locke yet.
Okay.
Locke is the county. Locke is the referee.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of diverse opinions. A referee is badly needed.
Thank you. Deborah?
Well, a lot of people have brought up money, and I just want to say, and everybody should be seated when they hear that our assessments monthly are $60 for residential or $120 for commercial. I don't think there's any town that has essentially an HOA whose assessments are so low. In fact, they are lower than we were created. And what is that, over 20 years ago? I mean, it's crazy. And one of our problems is that our assessments are below, they don't even reflect inflation.
Sure.
That's ridiculous. So we're crying poverty. Well, we're not paying for anything.
Yeah.
If you can't live in a town, if you can't keep a home, and some of us bought our homes for our land for nearly nothing. I don't want to say what my taxes are from Sacramento County.
I don't want to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's so cheap. We have to put more assessment money forth. It's ridiculous. So I don't want to hear any more complaints about money.
Okay.
I think we had one more question in the back.
Continuing on that one, assessments, some of the business owners in Locke aren't required to have business licenses, and their assessments are $30, whereas those of us on Main Street, our assessments are $120 per month for absolutely no services whatsoever that we can see. Regarding the division between Main Street and Key Street, years ago we used to be a cohesive town where the folks who lived on Main Street could go to the gardens and enjoy themselves. But there is an invisible fence in the alleyway between the Main Street properties and the Key Street properties. There's an invisible fence that is only created by personality feuds between Key Street and Main Street. I don't think that creating two sets of rules with HOAs or community service districts or different sets of rules is going to solve the problem. I think the only solution is time, Mother Nature, and going on to the next level of whatever.
Okay, I'm pulling the plug. Sorry, Russell, I'm going to pull the plug. We'll come back in the beginning of the year with some of the things that we've sussed out here and explored of how to move forward, because I'm not going to wait for people to pass away before we try to step in to fix Locke. So anyway.
Final thing, everyone, there was a sign-in sheet that asked for your email address when you came in. So if you would like information in advance of the next meeting, please make sure that you put your email on that, and we will send you those details.
And we're also happy to send out the two options that we handed out today. We'll send that out in PDF form to all of you. And if you have additional questions in the next week or two that weren't brought up tonight, but you'd like us to be aware of, you can respond to that, and we'll add that to our list of things to address before we come back in the new year.
Could I ask one question? Because I came here expecting you to address a lawsuit that was just won by a citizen by the name of Tony Lee. The judge
Okay, I'm not going to address that, Gene, and it was not won by a citizen. The judge issued a judgment saying that the defendants had not made their case, and so that's a completely different thing from establishing merits. That's not what we're here to talk about, but I appreciate that. Okay, thank you, everyone, for coming out. I
Very much.
appreciate it.
Really
Thank you.
Appreciate it.